I don't think that anybody who's going to be in it long term, if they should be relying on other people's encouragement. You got to make a decision. If you do it once, you will understand the meaning of doing hard things just because you said you would. Not because you're seeing results, not because you're getting the reaction you want, not because the money is coming in, but because you said you would. And that's the decision you got to make first.
Hey, this is The Delusional Show, and it's your host, Michelle Coyle, and I am here with my dear friend, Ken Okazaki. Ken, please introduce yourself.
Michelle, I'm Ken Okazaki. I was born in a cult, and then I escaped and started $1 million business.
Such a cool delusional story, and we will try to treat it with sensitivity, but you tell us as much as you want to tell us. Okay, so start from the beginning. How did you get into a cult? You were born into the cult?
That's how I got in. Yeah.
How did your parents get into the cult?
Okay, so the name of the cult is the Children of God. They've been on Netflix, they've been on national TV in the US. And I have a feeling that they came to Japan because they were starting to get too well known over there in the US. So they started going to other countries. That's just my theory. My parents got recruited when they were both 15, 16 years old, like really young. And then they were very excited about the whole, prospect of, rescuing the world before, the apocalypse and, converting everybody to Christianity. Even though they didn't grow up with a Christian background, it was just like this kind of Japan was opening up to like Western ideas and stuff at the time. And there were rules within the cult that you can only like marry, within the cult, like to other cult members. So they, I guess, they met each other and then started having kids, and here I am. So
So
that's how I
they
got
were
into the
both
cult.
like recruited into the cult separately as teens, and then met each other in the
Hmm.
cult, and
Hmm.
they were in the only marriageable pool of people, so they married each other
Yep,
and
something
had
like
you. Okay, and then you grew up all the way into adulthood in this thing, or tell us what happened?
yeah. So I will try to give the highlights, and I could dive into like different areas that may be be of interest to you. Things started getting weird when I became a teenager. I was like, the logical part of my brain started developing, and I was just like, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. But growing up, we were really strictly controlled as far as what we were allowed to read and watch, and everything. Most of the publications we were reading were stuff created by the cult. Like, there weren't textbooks from outside. TV shows were all censored and then recorded on VHS tapes, and then even edited to take any objectionable information out. So that's the world I grew up in. Was every single piece of input I had was carefully curated to or created from scratch, and it was all kind of centered around this apocalyptic narrative. Like the Jesus is going to come through the clouds in the the year was 1993.
Oh,
And yeah, that was it, and then Antichrist is going to take over, and all this, kind of from the book of Revelations. I know like so much Bible scripture is crazy because they had us memorize all this stuff, the selective stuff that supported what they
right.
wanted us to think. But I remember it was 1995, so I'm 15 years old. I think we're about the same age, right, Michelle? Pretty close.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got a hold of a computer that had Windows 95 on it, and I could access the internet. And that's when I was just like, whoa, this is not matching up, and I started actually figuring out like, like a lot of these missing, pieces within, this thing called logic, the things that
Mhm.
weren't fitting together. And I had to start reconstructing a lot of what reality was outside of all the stuff I've been taught. And it was a process, but let's just say that by the age 16, 17, I was just like, I'm out of here. I had to leave. And I left Japan, but I still wasn't like sure what I wanted to do. And so the cult had like different, let's just say chapters. We called it homes, in different parts of the world. And, you could go between them. So I took off to India
Mm.
because I knew there were some chapters there, and I could stay with them. But my intention was not at all about being a missionary there. It was just like I just want to see more of the world. and it's kind of convenient. They had this network set up, but mentally I was just checked out, and literally I was gonna just play along as long as it didn't interfere with what I wanted to do. And at some point I was just expecting them to kick me out, it's like, oh, this guy is not a true believer. But I was like okay with that because I was like already on my way. I just wanted to leave. And so I went to India. That was interesting. And then another place I went to was Uganda, and that's where I met my wife, Natasha. And she was also a cult member at the time.
I
Now,
was going
here's
to
the
ask
thing.
because I thought you guys met in the cult. So
We did. We
yeah.
did. So I'm 19 years old when I first meet her. And she was actually, there was like a humanitarian aspect of the cult, and she was a part
Okay,
of
that's
that.
good. That's good that they were
They
helping.
they were very organized, like very organized. And so they actually had a contract with the Ugandan government to help rehabilitate the education system, the national curriculum, because and again, my story's getting a little long here, but Idi Amin, the genocidal dictator, he had completely scrubbed, Western morals out of the education curriculum, and that was a problem. So they had to reintegrate it without it becoming too religious. So she was a part of that team. So we were making a documentary about this project, which went on to air national in the US as an infomercial, and they needed crew members, and that's where I learned how to hold a camera and edit video. Just picture this, right? So I'm there with this camera. I'm just like, no one's really looking over my shoulder. I can do whatever I want. I'm in this wild, exciting place called Uganda. And my Natasha at the time, she's going out to these really rural schools. We're talking about like literally mud walls, a thatch roof, and rocks on the floor. But she had to test some material to see if it translated to rural areas as well. So I get to sit there all day with a camera. I'm just staring at this really, hot, French woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. And so during the day, I'm just with her all day. I'm just filming, right? And then in the evenings, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's not much to do. So we start dating, and yeah, I mean, who wouldn't, right?
Right.
Especially with someone like Natasha. So, and one thing leads to another, and she gets pregnant, and I'm just like, oh crap! Now my whole plan of being this, of leaving is kind of messed up, because I found out very soon after that she's a real true believer, and she doesn't want to leave. Like she's just like, she's committed.
Right.
But now I got a kid with her, right? So that really slowed things down. And I knew that if I just left, we would either have a very painful, difficult legal battle, or I would not have the kids. Like that, it would be one or the other.
Right.
So I decided to stay, and my whole strategy at the time, so this is 20-year-old me or 21-year-old me, I think, was to just slowly plant seeds of doubt, little by little by little. Yes, I'm not kidding. That was my strategy, until she decides to leave with me, because I know that eventually logic has to win. Eventually.
Well, okay, and in the meantime, you're continuing to have kids together, right?
So we got married, but I wanted to separate myself from like cult activities. So we were trying to go like, I wanted to take us to kind of like remote areas where there's not so many other cult members. But she technically had to be a member, she was like not going to leave. So there were some minimum requirements and stuff, like you had to be in a place with at least one other family. They had the system where you kind of report on each other and stuff. So I was looking for situations where there was the minimum oversight, but that still satisfied her need to feel connected to, the Lord's will at the time.
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to give you for now. You let me know where you want to go with this.
Well, I want to go to all the kids you had, and because you ended up with how many children, Ken?
Oh, 66,000. No, 6.
Yeah, pretty much. Might as well.
6 kids.
6 kids, which to me might as well be 66,000. I have 2 kids, and 6 kids I can't imagine having. And so how many of these children were born while you two were still involved with the children of God?
I think all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then they get born into
the last
cult.
one was really close to around the time that we left.
Okay. So you have all 6 kids. You're on your 6th kid. Now we're birthing the next generation of the children of God together here. And then what finally got Natasha on board with you in terms of we're getting out of this thing?
Okay, so they made this new policy within the cult, the Children of God, where you could be a full-time member or you could be like a part-time member.
Oh.
And then over the years of planting seeds of doubt, I was just like, hey, we could be part-time members. And that meant that you could just live with your family alone and you don't have to do all this reporting and stuff. And so for the first time, I'm in my 30s, I think, at the time. And we go out and get our own place. And she just like, it was rough because I don't have any qualifications or any degrees to go get, a high paying job. But for the first time, we had our own place. She's never lived in her own home. It's always been, within a commune, right?
Hmm.
And she started really loving this idea. She's like, "Oh, it's just our family, and like literally, the food in the fridge is ours, and we're not, assigned to a certain room in some big dormitory style place, right?"
Right.
And and then she started kind of liking the lifestyle and the freedom. And then I remember about a year after that, we talked about it over and over, and finally she said, "Okay, fine, let them know we want to leave." And to this day, she still kind of like affects her. But when we said, "Yeah, we're out, we don't want to be a part of this," I think we sent an email. We got no response. We got like, there was no acknowledgement, nothing. And I think for the most part, there was a ton of people leaving around the same time. So they're just like, yeah, just another one, out. And probably our leaders at the time were probably very emotionally distraught. And they were just like, "Oh, I can't deal with this." But when we put in that notice, she was expecting, like after 30 plus years, of giving our lives, there's going to be some type of, like begging us to stay or appreciating the time that we spent with them. But there was just like, just nothing. And we stopped tithing to them, which was, uh, officially marking, like, okay, we're done. And then she was just like, "Well, I guess that's it, like, you know, now what, But that was the extent of me escaping, was just letting them know we no longer. But it had to be done in stages because Natasha really didn't. She really believed in this for a long time. And now she doesn't, because she's kind of like changed her input. Like, just to give you an idea of how strong you know, if I escaped in any sense, it's I escaped from the belief system that they installed in me while I was still too young to rationalize any of what they told me. And that would be reinforced by mandatory daily 90 minutes of reading their indoctrination material, like
Hmm.
every day, 90 minutes. And you're not allowed to skip that, no day of the week. And I grew up thinking that that's how you stay within God's will. Otherwise, you're going to get punished.
Well, right. I mean, so, you can call it a cult or a high control group or whatever you want to call it, but obviously
And it
they
was a
are,
cult and a high control group.
and,
It was
and
both.
yeah, they're indoctrinating you from birth. They're limiting your exposure or fully cutting off your exposure to any other outside sources of information. You're only allowed to marry within the cult. I assume your friends are all in the cult, your family, your parents are in the cult, everybody's in the cult.
Yep.
And so sure, you can leave at any time, but you're walking out with, like you said, no skills, no qualifications, because I assume they also limited your access to formal education and
Yep.
that kind of thing.
It
Yeah.
wasn't. It was definitely not encouraged. I think they allowed it in some cases where literally, they, you there was nobody to take care of the kids at home, and then the parents need to go out and be missionaries all day. So that was they made exceptions, but in my case, it was like no, it's like strictly homeschooling, and
Yeah.
then it was their curriculum and their program, and it was just
Yeah.
reinforcing all this stuff. So
So,
yeah, it was
I
it
mean,
was a
just
very
because they didn't like come
I,
after you with machine guns or something when you tried to leave doesn't mean that that wasn't, I would still characterize that as an escape because they make it exceedingly, the way you're describing it, at least, they make it exceedingly difficult
yeah.
for you to go. You're going to have to say either I'm cutting off friends, family, wife, kids,
Hmm.
or and I don't know how to even support myself. So let's start there. So you guys finally leave and you've got 6 kids and you have no formal education and you're in your 30s, right? How do you start
Yep.
from there?
Yeah. So it was actually interesting because my dad had already left like maybe a decade ago.
Mm,
And I still to this day kind of wonder why he didn't try to pull us out, once he realized what's going on. But I think he didn't want to create conflict with my mom, I guess. I'm not sure what it was, but he started his own business. And when I asked him around the time that I left if I could get a job working with him to start, he said yes. So that was my very first job. And it wasn't much. It was like barely enough to pay the bills, but at the time it was something, it was meant like at least freedom from the cult, and we could do this, do this thing. And that's when I just started kind of becoming more aware of like, okay, what actually happens in the real world in terms of how do you make money? How do you do a business deal? How do you, what does it even mean to get a salary? Because I never did any of that before.
Mm-hmm. So you're
Yeah.
starting from nothing and you're starting a business like your dad. What business did you start and
No, no, no,
why?
I was working for my dad
Oh, you
as an
worked for
employee.
your dad. Okay, so
Yeah.
you learned business from your dad. And what kind of
I
business did
learned
he?
something. Yeah.
So what kind of business was he running? What were you learning?
Yeah. So he was running an events business. So
Hmm.
I kind of followed in his footsteps in some sense with my first business. But so his business was his own personal development seminars in Japan.
Hmm.
And, he would run ads, get people to come to his seminars, and then he'd sell them on like on a membership type of thing. And the other thing he would do is he would sell large uh, packages of tickets for Tony Robbins events overseas, and then I started flying with 100, maybe 150. I think we got like 300, maybe sometimes, of Japanese audiences, and we take them to a Tony Robbins event, and then we do the translations, the live interpretation, the workbooks, everything. But that was kind of my introduction to personal development through that work, and
Hmm.
also my introduction to a lot of exposure to foreigners, people who speak English, because I'm living in Japan. I grew up in Japan, right? And then I started seeing like all kinds of, ways to live a life out, like I started getting ideas like, what do you do? You run a coffee shop. That's amazing. How does that work? You run a pet grooming service. How does that work? Like, my horizons got really broadened just from meeting all kinds of people like that.
So did your dad become kind of a big deal in Japan? Was he like the Tony Robbins of Japan? Or how big did his personal development business get?
I think that he had a very strong fan base. He wrote a few books that became number one bestsellers in Japan for like
Wow.
multiple months in a row. Um, a lot of people have called him the Tony Robbins of Japan, but because I met them both, they're not really the same. Sometimes the high energy type of events he did, were quite exciting, and he could fill a stadium. So
That's nothing to sneeze at. And
no,
now
it's
it's
not.
like, now we're going to have your dad on the podcast because now I want to know how he went from leaving the cult to starting a person. It's not like anyone can just, oh, I'm starting a personal development business and I'm filling stadiums. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It
How did he
is.
do that? Like just starting from nothing.
To tell you the truth, okay, so this is from what he told me, because once he left the cult, then we were excommunicated. Like we're not allowed
Right.
to have relations anymore, right?
Right.
So I'm not keeping up with his life
So
anymore.
there's like a 10-year black box period where you're not in contact with your dad at all.
Um, I think that part of it was by choice. Like I was just wanting to do my own thing. I wasn't keeping up with any family at all.
Mm.
And also, this is like really early days, like pre-internet,
Hmm.
that all this happened. So I'm not. It's not like we had messenger apps or international phones and stuff. So that's part of the reason. So keeping in touch would have been literally handwriting letters to each other. But from what I understand, uh, he started a business where he was doing like a local magazine,
Hmm.
and it was just like he hired some local comics, artists to write comics. He hired a researcher to write some articles. It was targeted at university kids, and then he'd get sponsors, And
Hmm.
I remember he turned his house into a big literal industrial printing factory, and that went well for a while. And then he got turned on to MLM,
Hmm.
but he wasn't making so much money from the MLM itself. What he would do is he would help the MLM leaders to create the education videos on DVD and then mass produce them. So then he was like the media type of guy. And I think that somehow that led him to a Tony Robbins event. Maybe one of his clients, who was MLM leader, was in the Tony Robbins environment. So he went to check it out.
Hmm.
And then I think he had an experience which is like, holy moly, I didn't know this kind of thing existed. And then how can I do this in Japan? And that's how I gather it kind of, went from one thing to another.
Wow. So by the time you plug back in, dad is filling stadiums and hanging out
Yep.
with Tony.
Yep.
Okay. And so you go to work for your dad. And what exact capacity were you working for him? Like, what did.
Yeah. So I've always been very creative, and I started working on creating video ads. I organized his media team and actually built his media team. And we'd send people to his live events, and we'd shoot a lot of footage. We'd create the ads. He'd run ads on Facebook mostly at the time. And then there's some local Japanese stations. He already had a successful podcast channel going, and we helped produce those as well. Basically, yeah, taking care of all his media.
Cool.
And yeah, that's where I learned about, I already knew about video content creation, but this was more specific. Like, we need, 2,000 people at this state in the stadium in, 8 weeks. How are you going to do it? And I'm just like, I don't know. Let's figure it out. And
Yeah.
that was my introduction to media, content creation, and marketing.
That's pretty cool. So how long did you end up working for your dad before you went out on your own?
I think like 2 years.
Okay. Oh, so not very long.
No. So what happened was, there was a guy. His name is Jordan Belfort. We'll just call him Jordan Belfort because that's his name. And he wanted to come to Japan and do this, this big event. So then somebody who knows somebody is just like, hey, there's this guy named Ken. He's in Japan. He knows a bit about the events business. You should talk to him. And through not him directly, but through his agency, they asked me if I'd be willing to do that. So then I talked to my dad about it. And I said, hey, I think I want to really try this. The movie was a big hit. I think we could fill the stadium. So that's when I left my dad's company and started my own to produce this event for Jordan.
Nice.
Long story short, I sell like 2,000 tickets. I'm like, okay, this is going great. This is amazing. 2 weeks out before the event starts, I find out he can't get into Japan. He's going to do a no-show. Yes. So that's not really a cult-related story, but that was definitely a rude introduction to a brand new business that I was just starting to try to build confidence about.
We don't have to do cult for the whole podcast. That's
No,
just kind
man,
of
that was wild though. I was delusional. I was definitely delusional that everything's going to work out.
What happened? Did he eventually get in, or?
Nope. So here's the thing. We had sold the tickets. I had actually worked with him to shoot like promotional video for this and everything, and we even got a video of Leonardo DiCaprio talking, promoting him and everything. And that was not easy. So about 2 weeks out, we find out that he can't get a visa because in Japan, there's a law that anybody who served one contiguous year in prison anywhere in the world, anytime during their lifetime, is not allowed entry to Japan. Like, unless there's some very special circumstances, by default, that's the law. So that was like a bit of a monkey wrench. And I'll tell you kind of the process that happened in those 2 weeks. So we've already sold the tickets. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't refund everybody because I was using the money from the ticket sales to fund more marketing,
Right, like the Fire Festival.
Yes, I was a little bit like that. So what happened? I talked to everybody I could talk to. I talked to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan. They didn't want to help me. There was I think there was one more ministry. They were just like, no. I got in front of Miss Kennedy at the time. She's the daughter of JFK. She was the ambassador to Japan. I think she's passed away now. But I set up an appointment where I had 5 minutes of her time. She didn't want to help either because apparently, despite what he was saying publicly, he was actually not contributing back to, repaying his debts. He was not cooperating with the FBI at the time. I could say this publicly now because it's been like 10 years. I'm okay. I had been contacted okay, so I found this loophole because I remember that Snoop Dogg actually did an event in Japan. And I know he served over a year in prison.
Right.
I was just like, okay, how did that cat figure this out? How did he get into Japan? And I did a bunch of research and I found that actually what happened was he flew into a military base where you don't need a visa. And then he got what do you call it? A day pass where you could go out. and the ground, but he has to be back by curfew, like I think midnight or something.
Yeah.
And so that's how he got into Japan. And what he did was he did like a contra deal, and he did a concert for the servicemen, right? And I was like, that's great. I just need to find somebody from a US base who's going to fly this guy in, And so I did. I found somebody amazingly. And he was like excited about it. He watched the movie. He says, yeah, it's going to be great. So I thought, okay, we're in the clear. He's going to get this day pass. He's going to come in on military transport aircraft.
Oh my God.
I'm not kidding. And then what happened was a couple days later, we're working out the details. The guy says, oh, sorry, I can't do it. I'm like, what do you mean? We talked about this. And he's just like, well, I put up some announcements that we're going to do this thing. Everybody here on the base hates him. So, like if you do a contra deal, no one's going to show up. So it's not going to work. I'm just like, damn it, I talked to the Coast Guard about actually putting up a barge, 2 miles out from the shore, because that's international water. And they're just like, are you fucking kidding me?
I love all the creativity though. Yeah.
No, but I actually talked to the Coast Guard, and they're just like, and then I got contacted by somebody whose name I don't even know. And he was obviously with the Japanese Yakuza. And he was just like, hey, here's the deal. If you give us 5 million yen, which is at the time about $50,000, then if he comes through this immigration gate at this time, then he's not going to have any problem. And I was just like, okay. And then the fact that I actually considered doing that,
I was like, you didn't make a deal with
it is when you work with mafia or Yakuza, you do one thing, you're never out, because they could, dangle that over you for the rest of your life. So that's when I realized, okay, this has gone too far. I'm calling off the event. And so this is so I've already sold the tickets. I don't have the money to refund it. I paid for the event hall and everything. I paid the speaker fees, which he never refunded, even without showing up. But he, he never did the event in Japan. And I could have declared bankruptcy, but it just didn't feel like me. I was just like, I wouldn't feel right about it. So what do? I put on more events. And so I contacted all the people who bought tickets and tried to see if I could get them to swap out the Jordan Belfort one for another event that's upcoming. The level of trust they had to have is amazing. Like, this guy who's never done an event.
I promise this one's gonna be good.
Yeah, it's gonna get better, I promise. And then some people just wanted refunds, right? So I refunded everybody I could, and then everybody else, I just put it on a schedule so that after every single subsequent event, I took the profits and I paid back as many people as I could, while trying to maintain this business.
Right.
And it took me 2 years to refund everybody. That's how long it took. And during that course of 2 years, we did a lot of events. We put up many millions of dollars. And I remember the moment we finally paid everybody back and I was like square, I had no motivation to keep that business going anymore. I shut it down. I'm just like, I realized I was only doing this because I wanted to walk away feeling good about myself.
Yeah.
And that's when I pivoted to what I'm doing now, which is the content creation agency.
Yeah. Well, tell us
there's the story. A lot of delusional crap in there.
Oh my God. That is delusional. And like, you know what? I'm very happy that you did not make a deal with the Yakuza.
What?
Some people would have.
I considered it, and that's what scared me. And that was like, okay, I'm in danger here. The fact that I'm considering this.
Because you're right, you would have still been in there, and maybe you are, and you just can't tell us. So you're telling it this way. No.
Could be.
Could be. Okay, so you pivot to what you're doing now, and then you're able to make your first $1 million doing video creation. So tell us about that.
Well, it started with me having made some, like having paid, speakers, many, many thousands of dollars, sometimes, in the 7-figure range, and them having been accustomed to working with me. So when I shut down the event side of things, I literally pivoted and I called some of these guys up who were my speakers. And I said, hey, remember when we did that event in Japan? They're like, yeah, when's the next one? Like, remember how much money we made? Yeah, that was amazing. Let's do it again. It's like, well, I'm not doing it anymore, but would you like my help to start filling event rooms in other parts of the world, or even in Japan, but with me running your media? And that was my pivot approach. So I got my first few clients, very big names in the industry. And through that, if I say, I got so and so, would you like, I'm doing their promotion. Would you like me to help me with yours? It was pretty easy to get the next and the next and the next. So that's really how I grew my content creation agency. And but we didn't really have a product. It wasn't productized. It was just, you know, like, we'll help you. And I'd go in there and try to figure shit out, hire, some team members, dedicated team members per client, set them going. But the first time it actually, really started snowballing was when I created a program called 52 and 2.
Mhm.
And what year would this have been? Like 2014, 15, maybe.
Okay.
So it's pretty early, like social media video, like besides YouTube, nobody was really doing video. So what we did is the program was, we'll shoot 52 weeks of content, a year's worth, right, in 2 days for you.
Wow.
And the way we do it is we'd rent like a big, beautiful mansion somewhere we did the US, we did London, we did Bangkok, we did New York, Houston, LA, we did Tokyo, we did Dublin, like all over the place. But we'd rent it for like a week or two at a time, depending on how many people would line up. We'd set up 8 different sets, like a reality TV show. I'd bring in
Mhm.
a full crew with makeup artists, catering, and everything. Some of them were much more simple, but we started getting more elaborate as time went.
Yeah.
And the client would come in, and it would feel like like a movie set, right? That was the idea. I'd hire a local crew, and I just tell them, bring the biggest shit you got, because people love big shit. And everything will be prepared in advance. There's scripts, a teleprompter, the clothes changes, the makeup artists, and everything. And we would do. They'd have 8 different stations, like 8 different studio sets, and we would just go content, go piece after piece after piece after piece, and then we'd shoot 52 videos in 2 days, make them work really hard, and they loved it, And a lot of them would shoot like behind the scenes photos and stuff and put it on Instagram, and people would say, "Hey, what's this about?" And then that would be word of mouth. So once I got it productized, I could get like 2, 3, sometimes 4 clients back to back in the same location, and I would just work like a horse,
Mm.
and get this done. And then I take like a month break, and then I do it again, do it again, do it again. So that was the first productized version of my business.
That's super cool. Okay, so when did it evolve from the 52 and 2 concept? Why did you move away from that if people liked it so much? And
COVID.
aha, the
So
great
I can't go
disruptor.
fly around. I can't fly my crew around. My clients can't even fly around. So I'm just like, shit, like I am stuck. And that's when I was just like, but you see, what happened was, during that time of producing all the videos, and I'm working with so many different kinds of people, I had to develop a lot of frameworks
Mhm.
and systems just to get people to perform well. And I thought, okay, so I've been doing this for a while.
Mhm.
I'd lost a whole bunch of money when COVID hit. So
Mhm.
not only from, clients who paid up front for the year, like maybe they had to shoot like a few months ahead, refunded them all. I had rented a lot of locations, camera gear. I had put
Yeah,
advances down for local film crew. Like, I paid my airfare. Like, we were like really, like, thinking future. So I lost a whole bunch of money there. And I'm just like, okay, what do we do? And I realized, oh, what I can do is I could just say, hey, I can teach people how to do video marketing, the way I've been doing it. And I did my first webinar. That was scary as fuck. Like, way more scary than getting on a stage in front of 1,000 people.
that's
I don't
so
know why.
funny.
So I literally had, I had planned it all out, and I paid a friend, his name is Josh, to run some ads for me to put people in a webinar. And I had my wife literally like just out of frame. I'm just like, can I hold your hand? I could just literally, I'm not kidding, and I had, a couple other staff members in the room, all out of frame, and just like, I just need you guys here, please, because this is so fucking scary. Uh, so I did the 1 hour or so webinar, and we made a few sales. And I was just like, holy crap, this works. Like, I just turned around all the stuff I've been creating for my clients, the systems, and I turned it around on myself. And I had a proof of concept, like, okay, so these systems actually work, even for somebody who's got zero experience being in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And then the education side of things started. So that's my coaching slash mentorship slash consulting, whatever name fits for you. That's what we do now. And that's been going ever since. And then eventually we figured out how to do remote content creation for our clients. And that involved either them shooting their own content, we'd help them set up their home studios, and they'd send it in, we'd do it, or we'd have them work with a local videographer. So that's kind of the evolution of Ken
Well,
Okazaki.
yeah, but I gotta get into this, like, scared to do the webinar thing because it's so funny. You're like you said, you've been on stage talking to thousands of people. You're obviously putting everybody else in front of cameras, on video. Like, what was it about you in front of a camera, in front of a webinar? Because most people in our industry, that's not a big deal. We do that stuff all the time. What was it about that exact format that made you so nervous? And then aside from making Natasha hold your hand off frame, how did you get past that to where it became comfortable for you?
Mm. So when I was, ever on stage in front of like a lot of people, I was never the main attraction. I'm just the
Mm,
promoter, just like, hey
yeah.
guys, welcome so and so. Like, hey, everybody, thanks for coming, and make sure to pick up, the discount voucher in the back for the next event, or like that's the kind of thing I would do. I didn't have the pressure of being the main attraction. So me being the main attraction, maybe that's what freaked me out. I don't know. Maybe it's because I had a ton of imposter syndrome because I was, selling something that I personally knew worked, but now I don't have that warm up relationship. I have strangers in a room, in a
Mhm.
Zoom room, and I'm just like, I, you know, I don't know if these guys are like psychopaths or if they're like, I don't like half of them have their cameras off. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they
Mhm.
think about me.
Mhm.
People that come to my events, they've seen, like I can physically see them, and
Right.
if anyone's, being an asshole, I could ask a staff member to go usher them out. But I guess there was and also it was just the first time. It just freaked me out. It really scared me.
Well,
I never watched back the recording because I'm too scared to. I've
I
never
don't
watched it
usually
back.
watch myself back either. And I will validate for sure that like doing webinars and that kind of stuff to a room full of people with, especially with their cameras off, is very intimidating. You're like, are you there? Are there five of you there? Are you there at all? Who am I
Yeah.
talking to? Talking into the void is tough. I've been doing TikTok live lately. And by doing TikTok live lately, I mean I've done it 3 times as of the date of this recording, and it's similar because it's just you to camera, and people can comment, but they really like they don't. So you can see all these people joining the room, and you're like, "Hey guys, what do you want to talk about?" And you're like, "Please say something, so I have something to talk to." And you're just like, "What am I gonna do?" So I got these cards. My friend Kelly sent me these. Shout out Kelly. These sweet ass affirmation cards, and I just had them sitting on my desk. And I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna pull an affirmation out, and I'm gonna talk about what I think about it." And just do that for like 30 minutes, and be like,
Mm,
"Okay, bye, good night, everybody." And I don't know, people are sending me roses and I don't even know what it means, right? But it's so intimidating the first couple of times you do anything like this. And then for me, I don't know about this for you, Ken, but for me, like the more reps you put in, the easier it gets. And I was just telling you before we
for
started
sure.
recording that TikTok has been so helpful to me just because the algorithm kind of demands consistent posting on TikTok. And so
Mhm.
I'm trying to post 3 to 5 times every day, and that just makes it, you just can't be precious about it when you're posting 5 videos a day. Like some of them are just me with no makeup on from the gym going like, hey, here's something I was thinking about just now. And it's really raw, it's really authentic content. And I'm
Mhm.
into it now, but that was a departure at first. It was like, I don't have the makeup, I don't have the lighting, and this is not polished, you know. And then you just do it enough times that you're like, I don't care. Somebody made fun of my teeth one time. You're like, okay, whatever. Yesterday, a guy commented and said I had made a funny post about putting on all my makeup when I feel stressed out. Like I put on more makeup. And it was me with a lot of makeup on. And he was like, you need more makeup than that. It's just like, people are going to be mean. But I don't know. The more you do it, the less you care about that, right? I mean, do you find the same?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a simple framework that I use, and it's just like cadence is at the first step. Like you just got to
Mhm.
do a lot of it. Then you get confident. And then after
Mhm.
confidence, you actually become competent, which a lot of people think
Mhm.
is the other way around. It's not. And then you become proficient. And I think for the top, what most people see is they see authority, right? And they
Mhm.
they want to copy what Gary Vee is doing. They want to copy what Dan
Yeah.
Martell or Alex Hormozy is doing, but they want to skip the cadence. They want to skip the the confidence, the competence, the proficiency, and they just want to, photocopy that version of it when there's really nothing supporting it. It doesn't work. So I think absolutely you won't feel the confidence really until you put in the cadence, and that's important. That's the first step.
You got to do the reps. One thing I love about Gary Vee is he's always been very transparent about his beginnings, and he was selling wine on YouTube. And if you watch those videos, it's like bad lighting, it's crappy. He's, there's 12 people watch this YouTube,
Yeah.
and he just did it and did it and did it and did it until it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it took him a while, and he's been very transparent and honest about that, which I
Yeah.
admire.
Hmm.
Because it's, it takes a long time to become an overnight success.
Yeah.
So, well, let me ask you this because this is an inspirational show. For the folks who are stuck in the cadence part, who are putting in the reps, who are just believing, like me on TikTok right now, that this will eventually become something and this will eventually matter, what would you say to encourage them to keep going? 'Cause sometimes this can take a long time.
Yeah, look, I might come at it from a different angle. I wouldn't encourage you to keep going. And the reason is that I think that people who rely on external encouragement, they're probably not going to take it all the way anyway. Because as long as you keep relying on somebody else saying, "Oh, you're doing amazing, keep going." And if you can't pull that energy out from within, then you're only going to keep going as long as you're propped up by other people's, compliments or their encouragement.
Yeah.
I've just seen, like, for example, I think, Michelle, we both were in the same community with Dan Martell. He
Mhm.
was making YouTube videos once a week for a decade before he popped off, like a
Mhm.
decade. And it was just really, really like, there were some videos that just, if you look, go to his YouTube, go way back in time, some stuff like it didn't get seen, but he just decided, no, I'm doing it. And he got to it. And I don't think that anybody who's going to be in it long term, if they should be relying on other people's encouragement. Just like you got to make a decision. Um, if you heard of something called 75 hard, I don't encourage
Mhm.
it for everybody. But if you do it once, you will understand the meaning of doing hard things just because you said you would. Not because you're seeing results, not because you're getting, the reaction you want, not because the money is coming in, but because you said you would. And that's the decision you got to make first. But let's say on an encouraging note, here's what I will say is AI is getting really good, and that's going to work to your advantage
Mhm.
because it's much harder for people to game the system with keyword stuffing, hashtags and stuff like that. And people who have an authentic message are going to be shown up a lot more because
Mhm.
AI is getting smarter, realizing what real human engagement is
Mhm.
versus people playing the game with bots or AI or whatever else is going on out there. So if you have an important message and you know how to really connect with humans, then you're going to have a leg up compared to everybody else who's trying to play the games that AI is getting better at spotting and weeding out. So I think that's a advantage of the technology that's coming out these days.
Yeah, and there's never been a better time. I mean, technology and everything, and just the access that we have to technology. There's never been a better, easier time to start creating content. You can start with a phone in front of a big window. You don't even have to have, even 10 years ago, you had to have a certain amount of money. There were barriers to entry to be able to do it at the level that people can just do now on their phone. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Ken, thank you so much for being with us. Your story is awesome and inspiring and fascinating. If people want to know more about you or your work or work with you, where can they find you online?
I think probably Instagram and Facebook are the best places. So just at Ken Okazaki, KenOkazaki. And that's on both Facebook and Instagram. Follow me there, and you can see what I'm doing now. You can also see, what else is going on.
And follow me at Michelle Descale and at the Delusional Pod if you want to keep up with what we're doing over here. Ken, thank you so much for being on. It's been an honor to have you. I feel like I should do some kind of a Japanese bow. I'm probably being offensive right now.
No, no. Like, here's the funny thing. I'll leave this podcast with one last thing: is this whole thing about cultural appropriation. Like Japanese and Americans have such a different attitude. We just so appreciate anybody trying, like wearing a kimono, putting on uh, trying chopsticks or whatever. Like some people are just like cultural appropriation. But in Japan, we're just like, no, that's so sweet that you're trying to, you're making an effort to partake of our culture. So I think that any level of that is appreciated here in
Good
Japan.
to know. You know what? It is on my bucket list, and I'll just make it tighter. I'll put it in the next 5 years. Sometime I'm going to come visit you in Japan. I've never been, and I'm very excited to
Do it
see it.
before you're 50. How's that?
Okay, I can do it. That's a 5-year window, so
Yeah.
that works. I'm like 44 and a half right now, so that works fine. Ken, thanks for being on. Everybody, thank you for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.